You don't need to escape to a mountaintop or exile yourself from the world to understand the power of solitude. You just need to sit still, without your phone, without a podcast, without anyone to impress, and listen. Most people fear that silence because it reveals too much. But what if that silence is the very thing you've been running from, and the very thing you need to find yourself again? The Stoics believed that solitude wasn't isolation, it was insight. Not loneliness, but liberation. In a world that's addicted to noise, presence becomes a rebellion. Solitude becomes a superpower. Because the moment you can be at peace alone, you're free from every illusion that used to control you. Not every battle is won in the spotlight. Some of the most important victories happen in the quiet, when no one is watching, no one is applauding, and yet you choose to rise anyway. If you've ever felt the weight of distraction, if your mind feels overcrowded, this episode is for you. It's time to remember that silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. 1. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's clarity. There's a kind of silence most people never get to know, not the awkward kind that fills a room after an argument, not the artificial silence you find with noise-cancelling headphones. I'm talking about the silence that comes when you're truly alone, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. It's a rare state in today's world, because everywhere you turn, something is pulling at your attention. Notifications, headlines, voices, opinions. We've filled every pocket of time with stimulation, and we've convinced ourselves that this noise is a necessity. But what if it's just a distraction? What if it's masking something we're too afraid to face? We've been taught to fear being alone, as if it's a sign of failure or social rejection. But solitude, real solitude, is something else entirely. It's not loneliness, it's not isolation, it's not emptiness, it's clarity. It's the space where everything false falls away, and you're left with what's real. No performance, no filters, just you and the truth. And that truth, though it may sting at first, is the foundation for inner peace. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't escape into solitude to hide from life. They sought solitude to prepare for it. Because how can you face the world with strength if you haven't faced yourself first? Loneliness is the ache of absence, the longing for someone or something to fill a void. But solitude is the embrace of presence. It's choosing to be with yourself, not because no one else is available, but because you understand the value of your own company. And that's the shift most people never make. They avoid silence because it exposes the noise inside, the unresolved wounds, the buried insecurities, the restless mind. But the irony is, the only way to calm that chaos is to stop running from it. When you sit in solitude, uncomfortable truths will rise. You'll remember things you've buried. You'll feel emotions you've avoided. You'll hear the voice you've been drowning out. But that's not a punishment. It's a path. You can't improve what you're unwilling to examine. You can't grow unless you're honest about where you are. And that honesty is born in stillness. You won't find it in conversations, in distractions, or in the next achievement. You'll find it in the quiet moments when no one else is watching, and you ask yourself, what do I really believe? What do I actually value? What kind of person am I becoming? Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, found time to write his meditations in the midst of war and political chaos. Not because he had time, but because he made it. Because he knew that true power doesn't come from reacting to the world. It comes from understanding yourself first. He wrote, "Men seek retreats for themselves, in the country, by the sea, in the hills, But nowhere can a man find a retreat more peaceful or untroubled than in his own soul. That's the essence of Stoic solitude. It's not escapism, it's preparation, it's realignment. And here's the deeper truth. If you can't be content in solitude, you'll never be truly content in company. You'll always be looking for someone to complete you, to distract you, to validate you. You'll depend on their energy to escape your own discomfort. But once you become whole alone, you stop depending. You start choosing. You start engaging from a place of strength, not need. That's when your relationships become cleaner, your choices become clearer, and your direction becomes firmer. Think about it. Most people have never gone a single day without being surrounded by influence. Parents, teachers, friends, partners, social media, all shaping who we are, often without us realizing it. But who are you when it's just you? No expectations, no roles to play, just your mind, your values, and your breath. That's not an empty place. That's the most sacred ground you'll ever stand on. So maybe it's time to stop fearing solitude and start practicing it. Not as a punishment, but as a ritual. Start with 10 minutes. No phone, no music. Just sit, breathe. Let the discomfort rise and pass. Notice what thoughts appear when you stop trying to entertain or distract yourself. Over time, that silence will become familiar. Then it will become nourishing. And eventually, it will become empowering. Because when the world is chaotic, your solitude becomes your shelter. When people misunderstand you, your solitude becomes your clarity. And when everything external falls apart, your solitude reminds you that your foundation was never out there. It was always within. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't rush to fill the space. Don't panic. Don't run. Sit with it. Breathe through it. And listen. You might just discover that what you were searching for in the world was waiting for you in the silence. 2. Time alone reveals your true values. It's easy to think we know what we believe in. We list our values like a resume: integrity, honesty, discipline, compassion. But most of those words are just inherited, passed down by culture, family, or social pressure. We say them because we're supposed to, because they sound right. But in solitude, there's no one to impress, no applause to chase, no expectations to meet. There, stripped of influence, you begin to see what you actually live by. Not what you say, but what you do. In the stillness, all the noise that once defined you starts to fade. You're no longer being shaped by your surroundings. You're being revealed by them. That's why solitude is uncomfortable at first, because it holds up a mirror that can't be ignored. It forces you to see what you've been running from, the contradictions between what you claim to believe and how you act when no one's watching. But that discomfort isn't a flaw, it's a compass. It shows you where your real work begins. We live in a world of borrowed identities. So many of our goals and values aren't ours. They're copied from people we admire or expected by those we fear disappointing. You think you value success, but maybe it's actually security you're after. You say you care about kindness, but deep down, you might be craving approval. These aren't accusations, they're invitations. Solitude gives you the chance to ask the questions that surface when the noise fades. Is this really my path? Is this who I want to be? Or have I just been trying to fit into someone else's mold? And the answers, they won't always be comfortable. In fact, they rarely are. You might realize that you've been living out of alignment for years, chasing things you don't even care about, defending ideas you've never examined. That realization hurts, but it also frees you, because once you see it, You can start to rebuild. You can discard what's false and start laying bricks with what's real. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And solitude, strange as it sounds, is often the cure for that suffering. Because when you remove the imagined pressures, the assumptions, the voices in your head telling you who you're supposed to be, you begin to remember who you actually are, without the mask, without the script. You hear your real voice again, and in that voice, your true values emerge. Time alone also exposes how much of your life is spent performing. Think about it. How often do you act based on how others might perceive you? You dress a certain way, speak a certain way, even pursue goals not because they matter to you, but because they make you appear valuable in the eyes of others. But the Stoic doesn't measure his worth through others. He withdraws to refine it. He spends time in solitude not to escape the world, but to detach from the illusion that his identity depends on the world. And there's something radical about that. In a society addicted to external validation, choosing to sit alone with your own thoughts is an act of rebellion. It's declaring, "I am enough," without applause. I have value, even in silence. And the longer you stay in that space, the clearer your life becomes. You begin to see what actually matters to you, what energizes you, what drains you, what aligns with your soul, and what pulls you further away from yourself. Solitude becomes the refining fire. It burns away the false gold and reveals the solid metal underneath. Your ambitions get clearer, your relationships get simpler, your decisions become easier. Because when your values are no longer borrowed, your actions no longer need approval. You stop second-guessing yourself because you're no longer acting for someone else. You're acting from conviction. But none of this happens by accident. It happens through intention, through making space for that honest, often uncomfortable silence. That means protecting time in your day where you can be alone, not just physically, but mentally. No distractions, no input, just observation, listening, reflection. And at first, it will feel pointless, boring even. But over time, that space becomes sacred, a place where your inner compass is recalibrated every single day. It's tempting to think we'll figure out who we are through action, through doing. But sometimes we only discover our truth through stillness, through listening, not speaking, through being, not becoming. Because when the world is no longer speaking into you, what remains is what was always most true. So carve out that space. Don't run from it, don't fill it, just sit with it. In that silence, your real values will rise, not the ones you were taught to recite, but the ones you're finally ready to live by. 3. Stillness is a form of strength. Strength isn't always loud. It doesn't always look like action or sound like confidence. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like the person who pauses instead of panicking, who listens instead of reacting, who waits, watches, and responds only when it's truly necessary. That's a form of power most people overlook because it doesn't draw attention. But the Stoics knew real strength doesn't always move. Sometimes it remains unmoved. In today's world, we've been taught to associate strength with motion, with doing more, speaking more, achieving more. If you're not constantly active, constantly chasing, people start to wonder what's wrong. But what if strength isn't found in how much you do, but in how much you can endure without losing your center? What if the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove anything? Stillness is misunderstood because it's subtle. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't ask to be seen. But it shows up in crucial moments, the ones where reaction could destroy you. The Stoic knows that life will provoke you, test you, and sometimes even try to break you. But when you've trained yourself to be still, you don't become a victim of impulse. You respond with intention. You choose your moment. You think before speaking. And that space between stimulus and response, that's where your power lives. Think of how often people act out of frustration, fear, or pride. They regret words said in anger. They make poor decisions in haste. They chase validation, revenge, or relief without thinking of the cost. All of it, rooted in the inability to be still, to sit with discomfort without reacting. But stillness breaks that cycle. It teaches you that you don't have to act just because you feel something. You can feel and remain still. That's real control. Epictetus taught, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Stillness allows you to examine those judgments before they control you. It gives you space to ask, is this reaction helpful? Is it true? Is it necessary? Without stillness, you're just a leaf in the wind, tossed around by every external force. But with stillness, you become like a mountain. You remain while everything else moves around you. Stillness also guards your energy. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every conflict needs your presence. Not every opinion deserves your reply. When you learn to be still, you stop giving your energy to things that drain you. You begin to conserve it for things that matter. You no longer need to explain yourself all the time. You no longer chase every problem trying to fix it. You learn to let some things be, and in that restraint, there's strength. But make no mistake, stillness isn't easy. It requires more discipline than noise. It demands more control than outbursts. It takes effort to hold back when your ego wants to fight. It takes clarity to wait when your fear tells you to rush. The Stoic practices this every day, not because it's comfortable, but because it's wise. Because every moment of stillness builds the habit of self-mastery, and over time, that habit becomes character. So the next time you're triggered, challenged, or pressured to act, don't. Not right away. Breathe. Watch. Feel the emotion rise and fall. Let the first wave pass. And then, when your mind is clear, decide. That's how you build strength, not through domination, but through control. Not through constant movement, but through choosing when to move. In a noisy world, stillness becomes a rare and powerful virtue. It becomes your edge, your secret weapon. And when you have it, you don't just survive life's chaos. You become immune to it. 4. The Stoic embraces inner dialogue. Most people spend their lives in conversations with friends, co-workers, family, even strangers online. But the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one no one else hears, the one inside your own head. That inner dialogue shapes everything. It becomes the filter through which you interpret events, the tone that colors your self-image, and the voice that either pushes you forward or holds you back. And yet, we rarely stop to examine it. We rarely question whether it's helping us or quietly sabotaging us. The Stoic, however, doesn't ignore this voice. He doesn't suppress it or try to drown it in distraction. He listens. He observes. He questions it with calm awareness. Because he understands that if you don't control your thoughts will control you. And not all thoughts are wise. Not all thoughts deserve trust. That's why Stoicism teaches us to become the guardian of our inner dialogue, to test each idea that crosses our mind and ask, is this thought useful? Is it rooted in truth? Or is it just fear wearing a clever disguise? Marcus Aurelius gave us one of the greatest examples of this practice. His Meditations, a book now studied by millions, was never meant for public eyes. It was his private dialogue, written not to impress, but to clarify, to untangle his own emotions, to return to his principles when the pressures of power and chaos threatened to pull him away. Every sentence was a check-in with himself, a reminder, a correction, a call to return to virtue. That's what inner dialogue is meant to be, not self-criticism, but self-guidance, not noise, but direction. In solitude, this inner dialogue becomes louder and more honest. You start to notice patterns, the ways you justify your procrastination, the stories you tell yourself to avoid discomfort, the fear beneath the excuses. But with awareness, those patterns lose power. You begin to speak back, not with anger, but with truth. You begin to say, "No, that's not who I am anymore. That thought doesn't serve me. I choose differently now." And each time you redirect the voice inside, you take back a piece of your life. But this isn't about perfection. The Stoic doesn't seek to silence every negative thought. He understands that the mind will wander, fear will arise, and doubt will visit. That's natural. What matters is what you do with those thoughts. Do you believe them without question, or do you meet them with reason and clarity? Stillness helps you slow down enough to notice your thinking in real time, and once you can see it, you can shape it. This practice becomes especially powerful during hard moments, when emotions flare or decisions weigh heavy. Instead of reacting blindly, the Stoic turns inward. He asks, "What's the right thing to do? What would courage look like right now? Am I acting from fear or from principle?" These inner questions don't need an audience. They don't need approval. They're quiet, but they lead to strong, grounded actions. Many people think strength comes from knowing all the answers, but the Stoic finds strength in asking better questions, in challenging his own assumptions, in recognizing when his ego is speaking instead of his reason. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. Because no one can deceive you more convincingly than your own unexamined thoughts, and no one can guide you more powerfully than your own well-trained mind. So ask yourself, what tone does your inner voice use when you fail, when you make a mistake, when you hesitate? Is it kind or cruel? Does it help you grow, or does it keep you small? If your inner dialogue were a friend, would you trust it or avoid it? These are the questions the Stoic asks, not once, but daily, because every day the mind drifts, and every day it needs to be brought back home. You can't control every event in life, but you can choose the story you tell yourself about those events. You can shape your inner world to be one of honesty, resilience, and self-respect. And that choice, made in the privacy of your own thoughts, is one of the most powerful acts of freedom you'll ever make. 5. Disconnect to reconnect with purpose. There's a strange paradox in modern life. We've never been more connected, and yet so many people feel lost. With a swipe, we can reach thousands. With a scroll, we can watch the lives of strangers unfold in real time. But in all that digital closeness, something deeper is slipping away. Our connection to ourselves, to our values, to our purpose. And the truth is, when you're always tuned into the world, you eventually lose your signal within. The Stoic path reminds us that clarity doesn't come from constant input. It comes from deliberate disconnection, not rejection of life, but a conscious step back to ask, why am I doing what I'm doing? Who am I becoming? Those questions can't be answered in the noise. They need space. They need silence. They need solitude. It's easy to get pulled into the current of other people's goals, emotions, and opinions. You start your day with good intentions, but then a message distracts you, a headline angers you, a notification pulls you into someone else's world. By the time the day ends, you've been reactive, not intentional. You've spent hours responding but barely minutes reflecting. That's why disconnection isn't luxury, it's survival. It's how you reclaim your direction. Disconnecting doesn't mean disappearing. It doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or turning your back on life. It simply means making time to turn inward before you give yourself outward. It means carving a quiet corner in your day to listen, not to everyone else, but to the voice within you that's been drowned out by the constant noise. Because that voice holds something precious, your clarity, your direction, your purpose. Seneca once said, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." And the danger of constant connectivity is that you end up sailing toward destinations you never chose, following trends, copying others, chasing success without asking what success even means to you. But when you disconnect, even briefly, you create space to realign, to ask, what matters to me? Not to them, not to the algorithm, not to the world, but to me. There's power in walking away for a while, from the screen, from the performance, from the need to respond, because in that walking away, you walk towards something deeper. Your mind settles, your nervous system resets, and your priorities begin to reorder themselves, not according to urgency, but according to truth. Try it. Turn everything off for 1 hour, not just your devices, but your need to be on. Sit in that space without reaching for stimulation. It will be uncomfortable at first. You'll feel the itch to check, to scroll, to be needed. But if you stay with that discomfort, you'll discover something most people never access: still awareness. And in that awareness, questions will rise. Questions that clarify, questions that confront, questions that remind you of who you were before the noise taught you to forget. Purpose isn't something you stumble upon, it's something you return to again and again. And disconnection is how you find your way back. It's how you notice when your life is drifting. It's how you realign when your habits have become hollow. It's how you stop living on autopilot and start living on purpose. So don't be afraid to unplug, not just from technology, but from obligation, from comparison, from the pressure to always be seen. There's no virtue in being constantly available if it means being unavailable to your own soul. Your purpose deserves your attention. Your values deserve reflection, and your direction deserves intention. Remember this: when the world is too loud, wisdom whispers. If you can't hear it, it's time to step away. Not forever, but just long enough to reconnect to what truly matters. 6. Solitude sharpens discernment. Discernment, the quiet art of knowing what matters and what doesn't, what's worth your energy and what's just noise, who truly respects you and who's only pretending, what aligns with your values and what merely flatters your ego. It's not taught in schools, it's not earned through titles, it's developed in silence, in solitude, in the space where your mind, no longer shaped by constant input, can finally see clearly. In a world filled with endless opinions, algorithms, and distractions, discernment has become one of the most vital inner tools we can cultivate. Without it, you're constantly reacting, chasing every shiny opportunity, believing every compliment, falling for every trend. But when you practice solitude, not as an escape, but as a discipline, you begin to filter the real from the fake, the useful from the seductive, the truth from the noise. The Stoics understood this. They didn't just withdraw from society to find peace. They withdrew to refine judgment, to build the kind of clarity that can't be bought or borrowed. Marcus Aurelius, despite being surrounded by power and politics, made time to sit alone with his thoughts, asking himself, "Am I acting according to reason, or am I being pulled by desire, by fear, by pride?" That's what solitude gives you, not answers from the outside, but insight from within. When you're always surrounded by people, you absorb their energy, their pace, even their confusion. You become entangled in their emotions and their values. That's not weakness, it's human, but discernment requires stepping back. It requires asking, is this belief mine or someone else's? Do I really want this life I'm building, or am I just copying what I saw online? These questions can't be answered in a rush. They require stillness. They require honesty. And that honesty often only emerges when you're alone. In solitude, you start to notice subtle things: how your body reacts when something's off, how your mind clings to certain thoughts, how your heart pulls you in directions that don't always make sense on paper, but feel right. This is the intuitive side of discernment, and it becomes louder the quieter your environment becomes. But if you're always busy, always stimulated, you miss these signals. You override them with logic or noise or pressure. Discernment also protects your boundaries. You stop letting people waste your time because you've spent enough time alone to realize how valuable it is. You no longer entertain shallow praise because solitude has taught you the difference between being liked and being respected. You don't rush decisions because you know clarity often comes after waiting. This is the kind of wisdom that grows slowly, like a tree that's rooted deeply before it ever shows above the surface. But solitude isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's confronting. You'll see your own mistakes more clearly. You'll feel the discomfort of truth pressing against old beliefs. But that's part of the sharpening. A blade doesn't become precise without friction. And the same goes for your judgment. It's honed through tension, through sitting with the uncomfortable until you understand it. So if you want to make better choices, don't just seek more information, seek more solitude. Take a break from the flood of voices and return to your own. Give your thoughts time to breathe. Give your values space to speak. The more time you spend with yourself, the more accurately you can navigate the world around you. And here's the paradox. The more you embrace solitude, the more confidently you can move through society, because you're no longer swayed by every mood, every face, every trend. You've seen your own mind in silence. You've walked with your thoughts long enough to know which ones to trust. And in that trust, you find discernment, the quiet compass that keeps you steady when the world tries to pull you in every direction. 7. Use quiet time to refine your goals. Most people set goals in moments of noise, after watching someone succeed online, after comparing themselves to a friend, after scrolling through curated lives that look more exciting than their own. And in that rush to catch up, they choose ambitions not rooted in truth, but in reaction. But the Stoic doesn't chase goals for the sake of progress. He refines them in silence. He examines them in solitude, because not every desire is worth pursuing, and not every mountain is worth climbing. When you sit quietly, away from the chaos and the comparison, your goals begin to take a different shape. They're no longer about impressing others. They're no longer about escaping discomfort. They start to reflect something more honest, something aligned with your nature. You ask questions that don't arise in distraction. Is this goal meaningful to me? Or am I chasing it because I think I should? Will this actually bring peace or just temporary pride? In a quiet room, without the pressure of an audience, your real motivations begin to surface. You realize some of your past goals were rooted in fear, insecurity, shame, or the need to prove something. And it's in this solitude that you're able to let go, to release goals that no longer fit the person you're becoming. This is not quitting, it's evolving. It's realizing that growth isn't always about adding more. Sometimes it's about subtracting what no longer serves you. Seneca wrote, "If you do not know to which port you are sailing, no wind is favorable." You could be working hard, showing up early, sacrificing sleep, but if your direction is wrong, none of it matters. Effort without alignment is waste. Solitude corrects that. It slows you down enough to hear your inner compass. It reminds you that clarity isn't found in motion, but in intention. And here's what most people miss. Real goals are built on values, not vanity. They grow from within, not from the outside world. The Stoic uses silence as a workshop, not a place to escape life, but to sharpen his aim before returning to it. He doesn't fear quiet time because he knows that's where alignment is forged. It's where clarity is restored. It's where vision becomes solid. Think of your life like a garden. If you're constantly planting new seeds without checking the soil, nothing strong will grow. You need space to evaluate, time to nurture, silence to observe what's actually blooming and what's just taking up space. That's what solitude does. It helps you weed out what's hollow and give your energy to what's real. So next time you feel lost, overwhelmed, or stuck in pursuit, pause. Don't scroll. Don't vent. Don't distract yourself. Sit, write, reflect. Ask yourself, what do I truly want? Why does it matter? What would it look like to pursue this with integrity, not for applause, but for alignment? That kind of reflection isn't glamorous. It won't get likes, but it will give you something better, a sense of inner direction that doesn't collapse under pressure. A goal you can pursue without regret, because it's rooted in something deeper than impulse. It's rooted in who you really are. So don't just set goals in the noise, refine them in the quiet. That's how you stop chasing and start choosing. 8. Solitude protects you from external noise. There's a noise that's louder than traffic or crowded rooms, louder than headlines or arguments. It's the kind of noise that invades your inner world, the opinions of others, the pressure to conform, the expectations of people who think they know what's best for you. And if you don't step away from it, if you don't create space between their voice and your values, you'll slowly start to live a life that isn't yours. Solitude, when practiced intentionally, becomes your shield. It doesn't mean cutting people off. It means building a boundary between your truth and their projection, because not every opinion deserves a seat at your table. Not every piece of advice deserves your energy, and not every voice deserves to be louder than your own. Most of the time, the people around you aren't trying to harm you, but they're projecting their fears onto you, their limitations, their regrets, their safe path. And if you're constantly surrounded by those voices, even with good intentions, you'll start to shrink. You'll start to doubt. You'll forget what you believe because you've been too busy hearing what they think. The Stoic doesn't hate the world. He just understands its influence. He knows that to stay rooted, he must regularly return to silence, not to run away from life, but to remember who he is before the world told him what to be. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he still found time to write privately, to reflect, to sit in solitude, because he knew that leadership without clarity is dangerous. Influence without grounding is reckless. You may not be ruling an empire, but you're ruling a life, your own, and every day you're being influenced by the news you consume, the people you follow, the conversations you have. If you're not careful, Your values start to bend to what's trending. Your priorities start to shift to match those around you. But solitude interrupts that drift. It calls you back. It says, wait, is this who you want to be? In the quiet, you can separate your voice from the voices that cling to you. You begin to notice which thoughts are truly yours and which are borrowed. You become aware of how much of your stress comes not from your circumstances, but from trying to meet invisible expectations. That awareness is everything, because once you see it, you can choose to release it. Solitude also strengthens your resistance to manipulation. You're no longer as easily swayed by praise or discouraged by criticism. You see them both for what they are: external noise, temporary, fluctuating, not a reflection of your inner worth. And the more time you spend in silence, the more immune you become to those extremes. You stop living for approval. You stop bending to avoid judgment. You start living by principle, not pressure. But solitude is a practice, not a one-time event. It takes intention. You must choose to unplug. You must choose to step back. You must choose silence over stimulation. And at first, it might feel uncomfortable. You'll want to fill the space. But if you stay with it long enough, you'll find something powerful beneath the discomfort: freedom. Freedom from noise, freedom from pressure, freedom from false identities. That kind of freedom doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you clear. It makes you humble enough to question the crowd and strong enough to walk alone when needed. It teaches you that your peace is not found in being understood by others. It's found in understanding yourself. So when the world gets loud, when everyone has an opinion about what you should do or be, step away. Not forever, just long enough to hear yourself again. Let solitude become your filter. Let it protect your mind from what doesn't belong. Because when you can't hear yourself, you're already lost. But when you can really hear yourself, then no amount of noise can pull you off your path. 9. It's the ground for creativity and peace. We often imagine creativity as something loud, a burst of inspiration, a rush of passion, a sudden lightning bolt that strikes in the middle of chaos. But real creativity, the kind that builds, transforms, endures, almost always begins in quiet. It's not born in the noise, it's born in stillness. And that same stillness, paradoxically, is also where peace begins. In solitude, without distraction, your thoughts have space to breathe. Ideas that were once buried under noise begin to rise to the surface. You reconnect with wonder, with curiosity, with the part of you that dreams not because it has to impress, but because it longs to express. That's why so many of the world's great thinkers, writers, inventors, and artists guarded their time alone fiercely, because they understood that their best work didn't come when they were surrounded. It came when they were silent. Creativity doesn't bloom under pressure. It blooms under presence. And presence is what solitude gives you. The ability to notice subtle connections, to feel the quiet impulse to try something different, to follow a thought without interruption. You stop multitasking, you stop rushing, and in that slow, deliberate pace, you begin to hear the soft voice of inspiration, the one that gets drowned out when your day is dictated by noise. But this stillness offers more than creative output. It offers something far deeper: peace. Because in the same way ideas emerge in silence, so does healing, so does clarity. When you sit alone without reaching for distraction, emotions you've buried start to surface. Wounds you've ignored start to breathe. And that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's necessary, because peace isn't the absence of emotion. It's the presence of understanding, and understanding comes when you give yourself the time and space to feel. The Stoic doesn't chase peace through pleasure or comfort. He finds it through order, through facing the mind honestly. And that process requires silence. Not the kind of silence you escape into, but the kind you step into with intention. The kind that allows your nervous system to reset, that brings your mind back into alignment, that gently whispers, "You're safe now. You can let go." This is why solitude is sacred, because it gives you access to two of life's most valuable treasures, creativity and peace. One helps you build, the other helps you rest. One moves you forward, the other holds you steady. And when you practice solitude regularly, you stop looking for those things outside yourself. You realize they were never missing. You were just too distracted to notice. But like all things worth having, this doesn't happen overnight. You have to return to the quiet again and again. You have to make space for boredom, for slowness, for reflection. You have to trust that something important happens when you do nothing, because that nothing is where new life begins. It's the soil where inspiration grows roots. It's the space where your soul exhales. So if you feel uninspired, if you feel overwhelmed, don't chase stimulation. Don't seek louder noise. Retreat, even briefly. Let your mind settle. Let your breath slow. Allow yourself to be fully present in a world that constantly tries to pull you away. And from that space, watch what emerges. Your greatest idea might be waiting in the silence. Your deepest peace might be sitting just behind your distractions. And solitude? It's the doorway to both. 10. Wisdom grows in silence. Wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't rush to interrupt. It doesn't compete for attention or demand to be heard. It waits. It observes. It speaks only when needed. And more importantly, it listens. That's why the wisest people you'll meet are often the quietest. Because they've learned something most never will. Wisdom isn't collected through noise. It's distilled in silence. In a world obsessed with opinions, filled with endless arguments, hot takes, and constant commentary, the Stoic chooses a different path. He steps back, not out of arrogance, but out of discipline, because he knows that insight doesn't come from saying more, it comes from understanding more, and understanding takes time. It takes reflection, it takes solitude. When you remove the pressure to speak, something powerful happens. You begin to observe more closely. You begin to see patterns. You connect dots that others miss. You learn not just from information, but from experience. You begin to sense the weight behind words, the emotion beneath actions, the silence behind someone's smile. That's the seed of wisdom. Not just knowing facts, but understanding people, understanding life. And that kind of understanding requires space to grow. Wisdom asks questions like, is this worth my energy? What would happen if I didn't react? Am I acting from ego or from principle? These aren't questions you ask in a rush. They emerge slowly, in quiet moments. In the morning stillness, in the quiet of an evening walk, in the sacred pause between emotion and action. And when those questions arise, they don't always need immediate answers. Sometimes just sitting with them is the beginning of insight. The Stoics were constantly reflecting, not to impress others, but to examine themselves. Their journals weren't for performance, but for progress. Every line was a check-in. Where did I act without reason? Where was I carried by emotion? Where could I have chosen better? That's what silence gives you, a mirror, one that doesn't distort, one that doesn't flatter, one that simply reflects what is. And as that mirror becomes clearer, your decisions change. You become less reactive. You stop giving weight to things that don't matter. You recognize traps before they pull you in. You speak less, but with more power. You begin to walk with the quiet confidence that only self-knowledge can bring. That's wisdom, not knowing everything, but knowing what to do with what you know. But there's something else silence gives you, a deeper connection to something beyond yourself. Call it intuition, conscience, spirit, soul, whatever name feels right. It's the voice beneath your thinking, the one that nudges you when you're off course, the one that whispers the truth you already know but have been avoiding. You can't hear that voice in chaos, but you can in silence. So make space for it. Guard it. Protect it like you would a fire in the cold. Because in that silence, you're not just recharging, you're evolving. You're becoming someone who doesn't just know things, but understands them. Someone who doesn't just react, but responds with clarity. Someone who doesn't just live, but lives wisely. And when you do that, you don't need to shout to be heard. Your presence will speak for you. Your actions will carry more weight than your words. And your silence, your still, grounded silence, will become one of the most powerful things you own. Solitude isn't about disappearing. It's not about giving up on people or withdrawing from the world. It's about returning to yourself before the noise, before the pressure, before the expectations turned you into someone you barely recognize. Every quiet moment you carve out is a reminder. You are not here to be everything to everyone. You are here to be deeply connected to something true within you. The Stoic doesn't see solitude as isolation, but as alignment. It's where you stop performing and start observing, where you stop reacting and start choosing. It's the space between who you've been and who you're capable of becoming. And no one can give you that space. You have to take it, guard it, protect it like it matters, because it does. It's where your values sharpen, where your wisdom deepens, where your peace finally gets a voice. And maybe that's the lesson. The strongest, clearest, most powerful version of you isn't found in the chaos. It's waiting quietly, patiently, in the silence you've been avoiding. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. So don't fear the quiet. Step into it. Make time for it. Let it reshape your thoughts, refine your goals, and rebuild your mind. Because in that stillness, you'll remember who you are. And once you do, no amount of noise can shake you.